In 1941, a dairy farmer in Ohio grew wheat to feed his own chickens. He never sold a single bushel of it. The federal government fined him anyway. He fought it all the way to the Supreme Court. He lost. And that loss is the reason Washington can now regulate almost anything you do, even inside your own home. The Agricultural Adjustment Act of 1938 was Congress's fix for a real problem. Wheat prices had collapsed during the Depression because every farmer, acting rationally on his own, kept growing as much as he could. Collectively, that flooded the market and drove the price down further for everyone. The government's answer was a wheat allotment. Each year, the Secretary of Agriculture set a national acreage limit, broken down state by state, county by county, all the way to individual farms. Grow more than your limit, pay a penalty on the excess, whether you ever sold it or not. Roscoe Filburn ran a small dairy and poultry operation in Montgomery County, Ohio. His real business was milk, poultry, and eggs. The wheat was a side crop, grown to feed his own cattle and chickens, milled into flour for his own household, saved as seed for next year. In 1941, the government gave him a wheat allotment of 11.1 acres. He planted 23. That's 11.9 acres over his limit, and 239 bushels more wheat than he was allowed to grow. Congress had amended the law that same year to add real teeth, 49 cents a bushel on anything grown above a farm's allotment, applied to Filburn's 239 excess bushels that came to $117.11. Over wheat he was feeding to his own cows. Filburn refused to pay. Here's the part almost nobody tells you. Filburn sued the Secretary of Agriculture in federal district court in Ohio, and he won. The court blocked the government from collecting the penalty. For one moment, a small Ohio farmer had actually beaten the federal government in court. The government appealed straight to the Supreme Court. By the time the case reached the court, it was 1942. The country was at war, and wheat prices were rising, not collapsing the way they had been when the 1938 law was written to fight a Depression-era price crash. Filburn's lawyers argued that the emergency the law was built for didn't even apply to his situation anymore. The court ruled anyway, 9-0 against him. Justice Robert Jackson wrote the opinion, and this is the sentence that changed everything. That his own contribution to the demand for wheat may be trivial by itself is not enough to remove him from the scope of federal regulation where, as here, his contribution, taken together with that of many others similarly situated, is far from trivial. Filburn's 239 bushels meant nothing to the national wheat market on their own. But every farmer quietly growing wheat for personal use, instead of buying it on the open market, added up to a huge chunk of demand disappearing from that market. Add it all together, and it was far from trivial. That reasoning became known as the aggregation principle. The 10th Amendment reserves to the states, or to the people, any power the Constitution doesn't give the federal government. Before this ruling, there was at least a theoretical line. Congress could regulate interstate commerce, but not activity that was purely local and non-commercial. That stayed with the states, or with the individual. This ruling erased that line without ever mentioning the 10th Amendment by name. If the government can regulate one farmer's chicken feed, because, in the aggregate, millions of similar private decisions affect the national market, there's almost no local economic activity left that Congress can't reach. For the next 53 years, no federal law was struck down for going beyond the Commerce Clause, not until 1995. This case is still live law. In 2005, the Supreme Court decided Gonzales versus Raich, and relied directly on this ruling to uphold federal prosecution of people growing marijuana at home for personal medical use under state law. Like Filburn's wheat, none of it was ever sold. None of it crossed state lines. Same logic, 63 years apart. Roscoe Filburn grew wheat to feed his own chickens, refused to pay a fine over it, and lost a Supreme Court case that gave the federal government room to regulate almost anything. He never sold a bushel. The ruling didn't need him to. If you want the next hidden clause behind the laws that shape this country, like this video and subscribe. There's a lot more where this came from.